Hi, I wanted to record for you Island of the Blue Dolphins, which is one of the first books that we're going to be reading together as a class. And I'm recording it so just in case you need to listen to it while you're reading along or you need extra help reading it, this might help you. Introduction. Entry 1183, recorded by Father Gonzalez Rubio in the Santa Barbara Mission Book of Burials, reads: On October 19, 1853, I gave ecclesiastical burial in the cemetery to the remains of Juana Maria, the Indian woman brought from San Nicolas Island, and since there was no one who could understand her language, she was baptized conditionally by Father Sanchez. Thus she became known to history as Juana Maria. It had never been her name. Sometimes, too, she is called the Lone Woman of San Nicolas, but most often she is remembered now as Corona, the name that Scott Odell gave her when he wrote her story. Sadly, she was never able to tell that story herself, for her language was one that no one could comprehend. So the details were pieced together, guessed at, fabricated, romanticized at times, embroidered in the retellings. What is known as this: for thousands of years, the Nicoleño tribe had lived peacefully on a tiny 3 by 9 mile island about 70 miles off the coast of Southern California. In 1811, a Russian American trading company, led by an American captain, hired a group of Alaskan Aleuts and deposited them on the island of San Nicolas to hunt sea otters, whose pelts were highly prized. When the native Nicoleños objected, they were massacred. Some accounts say that the Aleuts then left the island. Others speculate that they were killed by the women whose husbands they had slaughtered. By 1835, there were very few of the original natives left on San Nicolas, and those who remained, it is generally agreed, were all but one female. The woman, who was later to be baptized on her deathbed with the name Juana Maria, would have been one of these. The Santa Barbara Mission sponsored a rescue operation and sent a schooner with its crew to collect the few remaining Nicoleños for their own safety. They grouped the small band of natives on the beach and then took them aboard the ship. But they left one woman behind. The versions of why this happened vary. The simplest: a storm was coming, they had to hurry, and one woman didn't make it to the beach in time. A little embellishment: the woman was with a group on the beach but ran off to find her missing child, and the crew, with a strong storm beginning, couldn't wait. The most romantic account: she was already on the ship when she realized her child was not among them, and she dived overboard and swam back. Whatever the circumstances, this was the moment when an unnamed woman became the lone woman of San Nicola. She remained on the island alone for 18 years. If indeed she had a child, it did not survive. Records show that when she was found in 1853 by fur trapper George Nedever, she was dressed in a skirt made of green cormorant feathers. Nedever described her as about 50. Other accounts say that she was maybe in her 30s. All of them describe her as smiling. A Sacramento newspaper reported the wild woman, who was found on the island of San Nicola, about 70 miles from the coast, west of Santa Barbara, is now at the latter place and is looked upon as a curiosity. It is stated that she had been some 18 to 20 years alone on the island. She existed on shellfish and the fat of the seal, and dressed the skins and feathers of wild ducks, which she sewed together with sinews of the seal. She cannot speak any known language, is good looking, and about middle age. She seems to be contented in her new home among the good people of Santa Barbara. And that is all we will ever know. In the short time remaining to her, she died 7 weeks later, succumbing to illness as her predecessors had. No linguist could identify her language or translate the words of the two songs that she sang for them. I knew Scott Odell, not well, but certainly well enough to have asked him questions. Yet I failed to do so, and, as has happened before when I have lost people whose wisdom I valued, I am left with regret that I can only guess what the answers might have been. How did he decide on the age she would be in the book? Clearly he realized that telling the truer story of a grown woman with a child would be less appealing to the young audience he intended. And so he began with my brother Ramo was a little boy only half my age, which was 12. A young girl, still a child herself, she laughs at her older sister, who paints her face with the emblem of a not yet married woman, and calls her vain. The protagonist faces the challenges of growing up that all 12-year-olds do. What a heartbreak to have to face them all alone, without peers or parents, without guidance or counsel. And how would he compress the 18 years of her isolated life into a compact and coherent story? Mr. Odell masterfully lulls the reader into what I can only describe as island time, without clocks or calendars. We have only the seasons and the sea to measure by. Many chapters begin with a sense of both time passing and the endlessness of its passage. The white man's ship did not return that spring or in the summer. Flowers were plentiful that spring because of the winter's heavy rains. Another summer had come, and still I had not speared the giant devilfish. Spring again was a time of flowers, and water ran on the ravines. After the fierce storms of winter came many days when the wind did not blow. Did he comprehend, starting out, the challenge it would be to tell a story that has only one human character? Most of us rely on dialogue and relationships to define the people in our books, to portray their change and growth. Yet after the death of the protagonist's brother, the reader must depend entirely on the interior voice of a solitary, uneducated girl. The author makes that voice so clear, so convincing, that we learn and mature as she does. I wondered what would happen to me if I went against the law of our tribe, which forbade the making of weapons by women, if I did not think of it at all and made those things which I must have to protect myself. And two, he has created characters and company out of the wild creatures and the natural landscape itself. It is as if Corona speaks to the sea, confides in the cliffs, whispers to the wind, and to the yellow-eyed gray dog, the fearsome enemy that she tames to friendship. Because of this, I was not lonely. I did not know how lonely I had been until I had Rontu to talk to. This is a book that is really about the things most meaningful to young readers, what we are capable of if called upon, the question of what home is and means, and what our relationship is to the natural world. More than anything, it was the blue dolphins that took me back home. My two young grandsons and I swam this summer with dolphins. They were not blue, they were shimmery gray-white, and the sense of their massive power and their restraint was overwhelming. It is so easy to believe in their benevolence once they have nudged against you and invited your affection with their smooth, glistening smiles. Rereading Island of the Blue Dolphins, I could believe in their blueness too, in the foaming patterns that they wove in the sea as they guided the boat through bright water. The blue dolphins left me shortly before dusk. They left as quickly as they had come, going on into the west, but for a long time I could see the last of the sun shining on them. After night fell, I could still see them in my thoughts. Me too. Thank you, Scott Odell. Signed, Lois Lowry, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Lois Lowry is an awesome children's author, so that's the foreword that she wrote for this book. So I really hope that you enjoy this book. As she mentioned, there's only a very few characters in the book. Most of the characters later on in the story aren't even human. They're animal characters that we get to know. And this is a story of survival. It's a story of using your skills to make your life a better life. It's a story of making a connection with the place that you live and making a connection with things that are around you. It's a story about finding happiness where it's most difficult to find happiness when you're being all by yourself and there's no one else around you. So I hope you really enjoy reading this. It's one of my favorite things about fourth grade, and it's one of those books that, even though I've read it, I don't know, 25 times, I still love it, and I get excited every time I get to read it because it's such a classic and such a wonderful book. So I hope you enjoy reading it. We're going to read it for the uh, first few months of the year in reading group, and I think you guys will really like it. And I also think that you'll remember it because it's a very, very memorable book. So this book qualifies as being historical fiction. The character in the story, Karana, was a real person, just as we learned in the foreword. She was a real person, but no one really knows about her life on the island except for her, because no one was there with her except she was all by herself. Archaeologists have explored the island since Karana left the island, and they've found where they think the village was. They've found where they think her house was. The tribe that she belonged to left behind a lot of artifacts, and so it's kind of interesting to keep up on it because it is based on a real story, a real woman who was able to survive for 20 years, 18 to 20 years, all by herself, not ever talking to anyone else except for animals. I live by myself. I have 2 dogs and a cat. And I think if I had to just be completely by myself, I would go bonkers. But having animals around makes life a lot more pleasurable and enjoyable. And so Karana finds that out as she's alone on the island as well, that she's surrounded by animals that she becomes friends with. Um, this is one of my animals that I live with. His name's Percy, and he just got a new hairdo yesterday. I gave him a haircut, and he had a bath, so he looks really sparkly and wonderful right now. So he's one of the reasons that I enjoy living in my house because he's one of my little friends. This is this is Winston, and Winston is also one of my little friends. And the two of them together, you're going to get to know them pretty well because they will show up in videos that I film for you. And when we go back to school, eventually, they come to school quite a bit as special guests, so you'll get to know them. All right, so hope you enjoyed reading the foreword, and I will talk to you later.